Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today. The title of my talk today is Science Visualizations, Emotions, and Risk Perception of COVID-19. All right, so for those who don't know, my research, I guess most recently, really focuses on the visual communication of science. So I'm particularly interested in how the visual formats of communication, like images, photos, graphics, data visualizations, food labels, comics, things like that, can shape people's understanding and attitudes about science. So I guess to open up the talk, I would just talk about this concept of science visualizations and kind of give you some context information about my research. And after that, I'm gonna talk about one of my most recent projects that look at the images depicting the SARS-CoV-2. I'm sure everybody here has seen this spiky fuzzball picture, and there are many other variants that you might be less familiar. So I guess the question that drives my research is how do such images may influence people's emotions and risk perception of the pandemic? And then after that, I will talk about some implications, but more importantly, I will open up the floor to take any questions and comments you may have. And so I guess, first of all, just thinking about science and thinking about the visualizations that have been used to communicate about science, there are many different things that can be considered or called as science visualizations. So this is a screenshot of a Google search that I did last week. And so I put science visualizations here, and when I click on image, these are the things that pop up. Okay, so I guess you can see many different things here that ranges from, super colorful, like sophisticated science visualizations that you can only see in the science journals to some kind of infographics or icons, photos, data visualizations that are more, I guess, just accessible to a layperson, right? So I guess, because of the the explosion of the technologies and especially the advancement of imaging technologies as well as the graphing software, our abilities in creating visuals to communicate science has been extraordinarily expanded. So it's really important for us as researchers to understand how the use of these newer forms of communication can actually influence the way how people see, feel about, and understand science. And so just for my own purpose, I would like to further define and break down this concept of science visualizations. So I guess based on the target audiences and its purposes, you have scientific visualizations and popular science images as two main categories of science visualizations. So for scientific visualizations, they're created by scientists and circulated within the scientific community. Okay, so just thinking about the figures or graphs that are published in science journals, like something I'm sure everybody has seen in your own discipline, those are created by and for scientists. And on the other hand, you have popular science images, and some of them are created by scientists, but aimed at audiences outside of the scientific community. So they serve a public communication purpose. And also you have popular science images that are created by the media to represent science for the public, like sci-fi movies, cartoons, comics, documentaries, YouTube videos, stuff like that, okay? And so I guess thinking about scientific visualizations that you see frequently in the science journals or other publications, a lot of people think that they are complementary or come secondary to the scientific discourse. Because when we talk about science, we always use words, text, computations, equations, super complex stuff like that. However, for a lot of disciplines, like biology would be one of the example, but material science, engineering, you name it, a lot of times the visuals are a very essential part of the scientific rhetoric. Like without visuals, I don't think science in that particular field will exist or even be complete. So here is just a very simple example, just thinking about hearts or human organs, even if I tell you like the name of different parts and how they work together, if I don't show you this image, if I don't show you information in a graphic format, there's no way that you can understand how your heart functions and works inside your body, right? And here is another example that shows how the advancement of imaging technology actually helps advance our knowledge about science. And this is, I'm sure some of you know it, this is just a cross section of like a wheat root. Okay, so if you slice the root of a wheat, this is what you can see underneath a microscope. And those like little human faces actually represent the tubes inside the plant that transfers like water, nutrition from the bottom to the top, whatever, you know it. But here, like, based on the more recent like scanning electron microscopy images, you can see the picture is drastically different, right? So here you can see the inside structures of it. It provides much details about how things, work and lay out inside the plant, and definitely provides more information to the scientists to understand the function of the organism. And so here, I guess, just thinking about locally, at UW-Madison, actually, they just established a new national imaging center that develops this new called cycro electron microscopy technology. Like I've heard people talking about it. It sounds like a super cool technology that can flash freeze, the subjects or the subjects that you're studying, and no dyes or other alternations are needed in order to create that image. And this technology gives high potential and allows scientists to create a highly accurate picture of the true biological function. Okay, so I guess this is just an example that shows you how science heavily rely on visuals to advance itself and develops new knowledge for the society. And so on the other hand, you have popular science images. Okay, so those are a different category. Like, yes, most of them are accurate. They are supposed to explain science and represent science. However, most of the times they are innocuous, aesthetically pleasing images of science that circulate in society. So I guess when you look at those images, can anybody give a guess like what those are? These are pictures of coronavirus, believe it or not. Okay, these are just many variants that people can use and scientists have generated to represent the virus. And I will show more examples later as well. So when you look at these images, they're beautiful, right? And almost immediately your attention is attracted and you become interested and you become curious, like what those are. And even without any verbal explanation, you almost immediately want to know more about it, right? Because that's the power of images. So I don't know if anybody here has actually read the article that Ashley sent out earlier in the week, but this article I think is very interesting. It explained how the spiky fuzzball image that shows a sparrow, that shows the coronavirus, was created by illustrators and scientists at CDC. Okay, so I guess if you have read this article, they mention a lot of interesting details of the creating process. So at first, they start with a scientific model. Okay, so they go to those data bases and trying to get like different 3D models that allow them to create this little, I don't know, like triangle shape, whatever, that represents the protein at the surface of the virus. And later on, there are much more design concerns that determine the final appearance of this image. Okay, so in this code, they talk about how they tested different colors to see what was going to work in a combination for us for our communication goals. Okay, and also she mentioned I didn't want it to be too playful. For instance, I tried like the greens and blues, but it just didn't speak to me at all. It just kind of fell flat, and the red and orange combination was just very striking. It calls your attention and makes you look at it. Okay, so beside the science, there are a lot of communication concerns around here. And I think in this article, the illustrators will also talk about how they want the image to visually represent CDC, which I think is very interesting because they want the image to look serious, to look, in a way that represents the authority of CDC in this pandemic. And they want the image to look pretty, and especially when they put it on a CDC like poster, like everything coordinate visually. Okay, so again, it's not just about science. It's not just about what scientists can see underneath their microscope. It's really about how to visually present this information that resonates with your audiences, that conveys your information and achieves the goal that you have as a communicator. And so, however, this is not the only SARS-CoV-2 image that has been produced for media use and public consumption, believe it or not. So I go to the CDC Public Health Image Library, and they actually have 9 images depicting the virus. And if you go to the NID's website, like the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease website, they actually have 102 images on their Flickr account. They have a Flickr account to show all of the images that they have created. And this is all of them. Again, I will just pause there for a second and let you guys take a look at all of the images and tell me what you think. Like any kind of comments, any kind of feelings, like what do you see? How do you feel? Do you like certain ones? Do you dislike certain ones? Is there anything that make you not think about a virus or make you think more about a virus? Like, what do you guys think? And it has a little check mark next to the image because it's just a screenshot of the computer folder that I used to store all of the images. So I see someone raising her hand. Let me see.
Me, I think.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, well, so I mean, there's a wide range of emotions from these images. Like some of them, the ones in the bottom right, are quite colorful and playful, whereas the ones that are about 4 rows down, on like 37 through 43, are kind of scary and like alien looking. And then, yeah, others look more severe and intense, and others look more playful. So there's a variety of emotions that come to mind when I look at them.
Right. Thank you so much, Brianna. That's exactly how I feel. Like when I look at these images, I was like, this is amazing. Like, you know, these are all different visually. However, like just at the first glance, you will feel like that emotion that are triggered and aroused by different visual representations of this virus, right? Okay, so a lot of people mentioned the colors, alarming colors, too many colors, and explosion ones are a little scary. I assume that you are talking about these ones. Um, and other things, image types, size scales, black and white ones. Yes, Mandy, I fully agree with you. Like those are the other images that are posted by CDC. And you can see they just post the ones that scientists got from their lab. They didn't do any alternations like the other ones that are published by NINID. And 39 to 42 look like monsters. Yes, I agree. Like a lot of people, you know, immediately draw attention to those ones because they just stand out so much. And look like they can be easily terminated. 26. Yes. So yes, those ones, right? Yes. So like when you look at those, you may not even think about a virus, right? Because they look so differently from, for example, like the spiky ball that CDC puts out there, right? So all I want to say is there are many different ways that you can use to visualize the virus, and especially during the time that people really crave for such information, how to determine the best way to represent this critical information. And more importantly, when you have many different options, what are the potential effects of your choices, right? And that has a lot of implications on public communication as well. Okay, so here I just want to show some examples that can probably demonstrate how some of the images can actually define what people see and connotate what they know about COVID-19. Okay, so this is a screenshot of Wikipedia, and you can see they use this image. And this is the first thing that pops up when you search coronavirus on Google. And this one, of course, is used by CNN in their cover page. And these two images, if you pay attention, those show up in the samples examples that I showed earlier, and they're used by Nature and Science. And I guess regardless of the content, regardless of the test, when readers or when audiences pay attention to the articles, you can see the very first thing or the very first dose of information they get is the emotional tone that is conveyed by that image, right? And you can see by using different visuals, really you're conveying that different emotions to different people. So my question for this particular project, after seeing all of the amazing visuals out there, is how do these images can influence people's emotional responses to the disease? Okay, and I was the study was done last year in June, March to June, and everything was locked down. I was just kind of bored. So I recruited a bunch of workers from Amazon. I'm a mechanical Turk. And that's just a platform where you can recruit people and let them answer surveys and collect data from there. So I asked each worker to rate his or her emotional responses to 70 images from CDC and NID and some of the third-party illustrators. So basically everything that you guys just saw, I asked another 500 people to take a look and tell me how they feel about it. Okay, so in this study, I asked 4 questions. First one is, how much disgust do you feel? Okay, so I think someone just mentioned that, like it's just so disturbing to look at some of the stuff there. And how much fear do you feel, right? So Brianna mentioned this. Does it make you feel fearful, right? Do you feel like those are something that's super scary? And in addition to that, I use 2 called self-assessment mannequin scale. So those are commonly used in visual studies. So researchers use visuals as measures to gauge how people feel about visual stimuli. So I thought that was a very smart strategy, but anyway, I just used that as part of my little pilot study there as well. So these are the results. Okay, so interestingly, I think disgust and fear is highly correlated in the data. So the more disgust you feel, the more likely that you will feel fear in the images, which is not quite surprising. And also, the more disgust and fear that you feel, the feelings are more negative, which makes sense. And the more arousal, like that you will feel inside your chest. Okay, that means the feelings are stronger when you feel a lot of disgust and fear in those images. So for all those 70 images, I do a ranking. Okay, so I just do a ranking based on their numbers and their data on those scales, and handpick a few images that really stand out. Okay, so these are the images. I know someone just mentioned those like explosions or aliens, like whatever. Those images, um, trigger a very high level of disgust and trigger a very high level of fear. And this fuzzball picture, as everybody is already was already familiar with it during the time when I was doing this study, only trigger a very high level of fear, but not so high level of disgust. Okay, and on this corner, I have some images which to some extent look weird. They trigger a very high level of disgust, but not so much fear. And those plain and doll images from CDC, they rank low on both fear and disgust. Okay. And so from there, I asked myself, why, right? So why is that the case? We've been looking at those images for decades, but why those images can trigger like such strong and different emotions from different people? So I guess the first reason is humans are highly visual creatures, and 70% of our sensory cells in the brain are actually used to process visual information. And one tenth of a second is actually enough for us to glance our environment and retrieve valuable visual information from the things that we're looking at. And also when you're looking at certain images, the low level visual properties, things like lines, colors, shapes, and textures, they can convey a lot of meaningful information, even without you realizing that, okay? Just by looking at something around you, they convey a lot of meaningful information in terms of emotions, in terms of the cultural meanings, in terms of what does it look like, what does it remind me of, all of the things just happen very quickly inside your mind. And talking specifically about images that I just show, like those pictures about the viruses, if you see it, if you feel like that resembles a threat relevant elicitor in some way, you are very likely to perceive disgust and fear. Okay, so here are just some of the things that may potentially trigger the effect here. So colors, I'm just gonna go back here. If you look at images here, this green, I don't know, it looks like mold, right? And this red looks like blood. It's not a very pretty like UW-Madison kind of red, right? It's a very weird looking red. And here, green and purple is a very typical combination that symbolizes disgust in this culture. Okay, and other things, like these shapes, I don't know, those really remind me of the ringworms or some kind of scars, And other shapes like, the irregular shapes and high contrast that you can usually see in this type of images that induce trypophobia. I don't know if anybody has trypophobia, but I'm just gonna cover that image for a moment just in case anybody doesn't want to look at it again. But those simple things really convey, strong emotions to us. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why, the images can just be received so differently by different people. And so from there, I wonder, can the threatening images actually shape individuals' risk perception of COVID-19? So in other words, if you see those scary images again and again, are you going to become more concerned about the pandemic? Are you going to see more risk associated with it? So I did a follow-up study, and this time I recruited 500 people from a national representative sample. Okay, so this way I have a much broader and representative sample. And I did an online control experiment. And for each of the treatment groups, I showed people different sets of images based on the results from the pilot study. So for the first group, you can see they received those images that are ranked high on disgust and fear. And so for the second group, the disgust and fear level are relatively low. And for the third group, those are the lowest. Okay, so you can see those images are most visually friendly, in my opinion. And for the fourth group, it's just a control group. They don't receive any stimuli. And then I asked them, first of all, how much fear and disgust they feel. And my hypothesis there is viewers will report higher levels of fear and disgust when they're viewing those highly threatening images. Okay, so I was hoping to replicate what I found in the pilot study. And for the second question, I hypothesized that if you feel very negatively about COVID-19 in the first place, like I feel fearful, I feel negative, I feel sad, I feel anxious, a combination of negative feelings. If that's the case for you, you're going to report higher levels of fear and disgust than those who feel less negatively. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. And then I wonder, will the effect of images on fear and disgust actually vary for people with different feelings toward COVID-19? So in other words, just thinking about me and my husband, if I have a lot of negative feelings, when I see those images, I should be bothered, right? So I should feel a lot of disgust, feel a lot of fear, it's just gonna make me unsettled immediately. However, if my husband, he doesn't really have a lot of negative feelings toward COVID-19, when he saw those images, maybe it's fine, right? It doesn't trigger any strong emotions from him. So that's my question. I wonder if that will happen, because for me, I think that will have a lot of important implications that I will explain later. And my last question is just, does exposure to the highly threatening images will make reviewers perceive higher level of risk associated with COVID-19? So whether that effect actually exists. And so here are my results. First of all, interestingly, when people see those images, they perceive higher levels of disgust, but not fear when viewing the highly threatening images. Okay, so here are the results. So this one represents a fear. You can see for all the groups that actually receive some kind of visual stimuli, the level of fear is the difference is not significant. This one is slightly higher, but the difference is not significant as the arrow bars overlap here. However, here, if you look at the level of disgust, people who are seeing those highly threatening images, they definitely see more disgust or feel more disgust than those who are seeing the least threatening images, right? So those visually appealing, visually friendly images, they don't make people feel any disgust or less disgust, actually. And so here is something very interesting, and I wonder what you guys feel about it. So I guess if you remember, my second hypothesis is if you feel negatively about COVID-19, right? If COVID-19 makes you super fearful and uncomfortable and sad and anxious, you should see a lot of fear when you see those images, which is correct, because the line, this is a very linear and linear relationship, the slope is very steep. So yes, that really determine your feelings, really determine how you will react to such images. However, if you see those highly threatening images, the attitudinal difference or the emotional difference is large, it's super large. Okay, again, just imagine me and my husband. If this is me, this is him. Okay, so our emotional reaction is very different. However, if you show us less threatening images, okay, so if we are all we're both in the group 3, our emotional difference is not that big, okay, so we don't differ significantly in how much fear we see in it. And the same case is kind of same, it's kind of same case for the level of disgust. So in other words, when you see those highly threatening images, I think people's emotions end up being polarized. Okay. And so my last question is whether, the exposure to the images will change people's risk perception. And there's no group difference there. Okay, so, but I have to mention, like, the study was carried out in August 2020. So by that time, I think this country was facing a second and third waves of the infected cases. So I guess that's a confounding factor that's really hard to rule out in this particular study, but that is the result. And so kind of just recap what I found. First of all, science visualizations of various appearance can evoke distinct emotional responses like fear and disgust among viewers, something that I don't think has been thoroughly studied in our discipline. And although people rely on feelings for COVID to report fear and disgust of its pathogen, exposure to highly threatening images ends up polarizing their emotional responses. And also, just despite the linkage between emotion and risk perception, right? So if you see fear, you may see more risk. Despite that link, exposure to the highly threatening images does not necessarily increase people's risk perception. And so from there, I just have some tentative thoughts there. But like I said, I'm more than willing to hear what you guys think, what you guys have for this particular study, and want to open up the floor for the discussion as well. So for me, I think the seemingly objective science visualizations are not emotionally neutral. Okay, just thinking about things that CDC and NINID published out there. They are supposed to be informationally accurate. They're supposed to convey science in a way that is neutral and not cause any bias. However, because of the visual appearance, because of those noise design decisions that come into play, it can potentially trigger emotional reactions that are not intended. And scientists, illustrators, and media professionals, in my opinion, should be mindful about the potential emotional impact of their end products, especially when they create the iconic image of contested science, okay? Because that iconic image of science, that spiky fuzzball right now, I think it already becomes a brand for this virus. When people see it, they think coronavirus. When people see it, they think about what scientists know and don't know about it. So I guess, that image is really important, and we need to make sure like that is the readiest way how it should be visually represented. And just from a research perspective, I think definitely more research is needed, and just help us understand how science visualizations can shape people's risk perception, or other attitudinal outcomes like credibility can be another interesting one to look at, and how the emotions can play a role in there as well. Okay, so that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments that you guys have.